All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are tackling a fascinating puzzle, a single dramatic verse from an ancient text that somehow holds two completely different and totally profound meanings. So here it is, Revelation chapter 16, verse 4. And the third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. I mean, wow. The imagery is so powerful, so visceral, you can practically see it happening, can't you? So what on earth could this apocalyptic vision actually mean? Is it a literal future prediction? Is it a symbolic story? That is the big question we are going to investigate, and we're going to look at this from two very, very different angles.
Okay, let's start with the first interpretation, the most direct reading, the third bowl as an act of divine judgment.
Now, when you're trying to solve a mystery like this one, where do you start? Well, you go straight to the evidence. And in our case, the best evidence we have is the words themselves, going right back to the original Greek to see what this verse is really saying.
So, first up, we're putting on our detective hats and decoding the ancient Greek. These are our first real clues.
Okay, to really get the picture here, you've got to look at the original language. The word they use for bowl is fiale. Now, you might be thinking of a tiny little vial, but that's not it at all. This is a wide, shallow dish, the kind you'd use for a religious offering. That one little word changes everything, right? It tells us this isn't some random spill. It's a very deliberate, almost ceremonial act. So what's the target of this ceremonial act? First, you've got potamos. That's Greek for rivers or streams. And here's a fun little language nerd fact for you. This is where we get the word hippopotamus. It literally means river horse. So right away, we know this judgment is aimed squarely at the big flowing bodies of water. But, and this is super important, it doesn't stop with the rivers. The text also calls out the page, the springs, the fountains. Think about that for a second. This isn't just about polluting the water downstream. This is a strike against the very source of the water, the origin point itself.
And what does it all turn into? Haima, blood. You know, like in the word hematology? The meaning here is, well, it's about as stark and direct as it sounds.
So when you put all of these clues together, you get a really straightforward, literal translation. And the third poured out his bowl upon the rivers and the springs of waters, and they became blood. I mean, just from a language point of view, it's pretty hard to argue with that.
But here's the thing. Words never just exist on their own, right? They have history. So let's look at our next set of clues, the echoes this verse makes with much, much older texts.
And wow, check this out. On the left, you've got our verse from Revelation. On the right, that's from Exodus, describing the very first plague of Egypt. The language it's almost identical. This is no accident. The author is absolutely 100% calling back to that famous story of judgment against Pharaoh.
And it gets even more intense. See, scholars point out there's a clear pattern here. The second bowl of judgment turned the sea to blood. Now this third one takes out the rivers and the springs. It's a systematic collapse of the entire water system. It's like a total final judgment on the very thing that gives us life.
Okay, so the case for a literal historical judgment is looking pretty solid, right? But what if we've been reading the map completely upside down? What if the rivers and fountains aren't water? And what if this whole thing isn't about a judgment sent down to Earth, but a judgment that someone took on for Earth? And that one question, it flips everything. It opens the door to a totally different way of seeing this verse, a symbolic, surprising, and Christ-centered interpretation of the exact same words.
So according to one major theological take on this, the judgment isn't just falling on some random river. No, it's falling on Jesus himself, who is called the fountain of living waters. So in this reading, the target isn't the planet, it's a person.
And you might be asking, how on earth do you get that? Well, it's because that phrase, fountains of waters, pops up elsewhere in the Bible, and it's used as a symbolic name for God or Jesus, the source of all spiritual life and truth. So if the fountains are the target, then this interpretation says it's Jesus who's taking that hit, absorbing that judgment.
This idea is often called the exchange. It's pretty powerful. On one side, you have blood, meaning death and judgment, what humanity deserved. But on the other side, he became that for us. He became the recipient of that wrath. So you see how it just flips the script? It's not just a story about punishment anymore. It becomes a story about substitution, about personal sacrifice.
And in this reading, the blood isn't just about an ending. It's about a new beginning.
It doesn't just judge, it redeems. It's seen as this incredible transformative power that flows into all the streams of human life and culture. It's about cleansing and reconciling everything. The whole focus just shifts from destruction to total restoration.
So there you have it. Two incredibly powerful and incredibly different ways to read the very same verse. Let's put them side by side and just see how they stack up. And you can really see the difference here, right? In interpretation 1, the historical judgment, the world is all about direct consequences. A rebellious world gets a direct punishment. But in interpretation 2, the symbolic redemption, it's about divine mercy stepping in. Instead of wrath, you get redemption through sacrifice. Two totally different worldviews in one verse.
So, which one is the right one? Maybe that's not even the most interesting question. What's truly amazing is that this one ancient verse is rich enough, is complex enough, to hold both of these massive ideas at the very same time. An idea about judgment and an idea about redemption.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How many other ancient texts are out there, just packed with different worlds of meaning, waiting for us to dive in and explore? Thanks for digging into this with me.